Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. And today we're going to be starting a new style that I think is going to be a little more comprehensive for me. And what we're going to do is we're going to be going over a master game. I'm going to be using Zurich International Chess Tournament from 1953 by David Bronstein. I'm going to select a specific game that I'll introduce here in just a moment. As I'm going through the master games, I'm going to be using the Fundamental Chess Openings by Paul van der Sterren to help us understand the theory behind what the masters are playing. And then once we get out of the opening and we can hopefully identify what the pawn structure is going to look like, then I'm going to use Chess Structures, a Grandmaster Guide by Mauricio Flores Rios to help us kind of understand what the middle game plan is going to be going forward. If we're not able to see any tactics or anything, this will at least give us a framework on what some of the most popular ways. This is a little bit of a difference. Most people, they start with the d4 directly in the middle. White could be coming out with maybe the two knights variation, which is kind of a trappy line. Oops, this guy was still here. Knight to c3. Black Petrosian follows up with d5. Let's see if we can get to where the variation kind of collides, which is here with d4. And that sets us up for, from what I'm reading in the Caro-Kann chapter of the Fundamental Chess Openings, is that when it comes to the Caro-Kann, knight to c3 or knight d2 doesn't really have much of a difference in terms of theory. With the due reason that black is 9 times out of 10 is going to take this pawn on e4. Now what that does is when we get to this position, obviously if the knight were here on d2, we would transpose to this position. It's actually kind of nice having both of those lines that will transpose into the same thing. It looks like the main difference between these lines is after d takes d4 and knight takes d4 is where you kind of get a branch. The branch is either bishop to f5, which is the classical variation. We've got knight to d7 or knight to f6. These are all the 4 main moves. Let's see what Petrosian decides. d4, then he had d5 takes e4, and then knight from c3 takes e4. He plays the classical with bishop to f5. And the main reason for this is that we are developing the bishop outside of the pawn chain before we close it off going into the Caro-Kann style pawn structure. And the big difference between this and the Rubinstein French is that we are able to get the bishop out. Bronstein, on the other hand, he says, this is black's standard continuation in this opening. Although theory considers it completely sound, he finds it weakness for the impudent 4, knight f6, knight takes f6, g takes f6. What he's saying here, let's just go ahead and say that. He finds that knight to f6, knight takes f6, and then g takes f6. Modern people that I've been seeing with this actually don't take with the g pawn, they take with the e pawn. And the reason being is that once this knight comes out, then he can't jump to one of his normal jumping spots to attack the king side. So this is actually not horrible. But taking with the g-pawn, obviously that is not something that most people nowadays would do, at least from what I've read. Now, if you guys know variations where people do that, please put them in the comments, because like I said, I'm still learning the Caro-Kann, and I'm just basing it off of what I know, which isn't much, but we're going to go with it. So, after bishop to c5, then Boleslavsky comes back with the knight on e4. It goes back to g3. Oops, bishop's here. Now, the reason is because obviously he's attacking. Now, this counterattacks the bishop. That actually follows with theory as well with fundamental chess openings. This is a move that is both defensive and counterattacking, obviously, because it's defending the attacked knight, and it's also counterattacking the bishop. Bishop to g6 is what Bronstein does. Keeping the bishop along this long diagonal as well as getting it away from being attacked by the knight. This is where we have the first deviation to where I'm now outside of what is inside the Caro-Kann defense, is we have knight g1 to h3. So now that we're outside of the Caro-Kann's fundamental chess openings, we're going to go ahead and follow along with the game, and I'll try my best to kind of figure out what the plan is. Knight g1 to h3 obviously develops the knight, and I think the reason that he went to the h3 square is because then he can obviously push with the f-pawn, but he's not going to want to castle to the king side. That would be crazy, but let's just see how it goes there. Petrosian plays e6, which is giving this bishop the ability to get out and get developed. And then from knight h3 to f4. Oh wow, that's kind of nasty. That's nasty. I didn't see that. From this position, the reason that he went to h3 was nothing to do with this pawn at the moment, but with the main threat of attacking this bishop again. This bishop is kind of done for, because he can't go here or here because of the knight, can't go here or here because of the pawn and because of the queen. This guy is effectively trapped. And this is the reason why he went to h3. Wow, that's nasty. So, Petrosian goes from bishop f8 to e6 to d6. Sorry, bishop f8 to d6. And that is obviously attacking these knights. He's looking to swap the bishops for the knights, maybe? Because when we takes back with the h-pawn, and then the knight would be being hit by the bishop. Let's see what happens here. White solidifies its center with c3, which looks pretty nice. And then we've got the knight on g8 goes to f6, fully developing and getting ready to castle kingside. And then white follows up with h2 to h4. He's putting on all sorts of pressure on this bishop. Obviously, any time that you push this h-pawn, he's going to take, that's going to crash and destroy your pawn structure. You don't want that. This bishop's going to be getting hit pretty hard. So black follows up with queen d8 to c7, getting these two lined up on this long diagonal. That way, whenever this bishop gets taken, the bishop can take the knight on g3. If f ever takes g3, the queen can swoop in, take g3 with check, and we will be up a pawn. I think this would be a good time to transition over to Chess Structures, a Grandmaster Guide, and just see what kind of plans white and black can employ in this pawn structure. So, white has a pawn on a2, b2, c3, and d4, as well as f2, g2, and he's already pushed the h-pawns. His pawns are where they should be. As far as black, we've got a7, b7, c6, e6, f7, g7, and h7. This is the Caro-Kann formation. Out of this one, white has better control of the center, and they have more space because the more advanced d-pawn being on the 4th rank. This structure is going to give better chances to white in most cases because of the more space. I'm going to be more constrained because of the lack of space. And for this reason, my main task is to dispute the central control by modifying the structure into like a 4-4-2 versus 3-3. I believe is what we want to transition to. Rio says that the main white plans in this position is to control of the center opens up multiple opportunities for white everywhere on the board. White's able to do a direct kingside attack by placing a knight on the e5 outpost, as well as targeting h7 with the queen and bishop from d3 and c2. We can gain space with c3 to c4, h2 to h4, and controlling the pieces to control, or placing the pieces to control the center. White is already well on their way to number 2. They've gained space with h4. They can push c4 at some point when they're ready to. Their bishops and stuff are still need to be developed. harmoniously, this bishop would probably want to come out here to d3, possibly, to contest this bishop after it's taken off. We could take this guy off with something, develop here to control the center. Obviously, we can then push it back, bring the queen up to d4 or d3. This knight here could also take this place. Once we figure out anything here, we could also bring it back to control the center on e3. These are all things that I'm seeing. Obviously, if you see something in the comments that you don't agree with, by all means, please shout it out so I can learn as well. This is all a learning opportunity. We're a community here. And number 3 is playing c4 to c5, which then restricts me from breaking in the center with my c5 pawn break. As far as black's concerned, my main objective is to dispute white's center and transform the structure. So this can be performed by breaking in the center with c5, which usually produces a black 4-2 versus a white 3-3 pawn structure with roughly level chances. Breaking up the center with e6 to e5 in order to obtain a symmetrical position after white captures with d takes e5. And this plan usually doesn't work because white typically controls e5 a lot from their natural squares. Like the d4 pawn is obviously looking here. There's usually a knight on f3. There's a rook usually on e1. Queen is usually on e2. And so the d5 square is very well controlled. But actually in this one, it doesn't look like it's under too much contention. I could push this. Obviously takes, and then I'd be able to break open the center. So that one actually wouldn't be too bad looking at this pawn structure as it is right now. 3, put pressure on the d4 pawn once c3 to c4 has been played. And by putting pressure on that, I think what they mean is that we need to add more attackers. So obviously we want to add more attackers here. So c4 is played, get a rook over maybe to the d file, swap there actually. Anyway. And then we can also challenge white's control of d5 by playing c5 and then playing b5 once white has played c4. Okay. Challenging white's control of the d5 square by playing b7 to b5 once white has played c4. So once we see this, then this is an option, attacking in the center. So as you may notice, all of white's plans aim for an advantage, while black's main plans 1 and 2 are essentially aimed at equalizing. So we're going to keep that page open for us to kind of check, see how this goes. As you remember, the last move that we had was queen to c7. And Bronstein writes that white now has a choice of queen to f3, stirring up an interesting double-edged complications, but it leaves black with a permanent weakness at e6 after the variation that he has. So Boleslavsky decides to go with h5, attacking this poor, trapped, and defenseless man. So since this bishop is done, he decides to go ahead and... Oh, no, he's not sacked. Okay. Actually, that's pretty nice. So bishop on d6 takes the knight. When I was reading it, I was thinking that he took the bishop and took a piece, but it was actually this bishop on d6. So bishop d6 takes f4, and then the bishop on c1 takes f4, and then the queen takes f4. Okay. Then we've got this, and then f7 takes g6. So the reason, obviously, that you didn't want to take with the h-pawn is because of the open h-file, which would have lost the rook. And then, before we get into that, as white plays queen to d2. So before I get into what Bronstein says, I want to take a look at this position, okay? So, obviously, we have 3 pawn islands for black. We've got this pawn island, this poor isolated e-pawn, and we've got this cluster over here on the king side. If I were to castle, I would obviously want to castle to the king side. There's a little bit more coverage over here. This is pretty aired out with, that guy was still here. I did not push b5 yet, and he did not push here. Sorry about that, guys. So from this position, I'm obviously closer to castling on this side. We have a queen trade here. So if I do queen trade, king would take, and I don't have any more bishops, but I do have some knights that I would want to get to this square, or maybe one of these two squares, c4 and e4, he wouldn't be able to castle. Well, let's see what's said here. So Bronstein says that this is a curious decision. So white offers to exchange queens, even though he is a pawn down. Petrosian may have entertained the hope that Boleslavsky would yield to the temptation to play queen b3. Queen b3 would have been over here. Queen b3, which would have been hitting both b7 and e6, but that would be destroyed easily by knight to g4. Knight g4, queen takes e6, check, and then king to d8. Oh, because of the check. So let's say he can't really check here. Can't check here, can't check here. So his queen's pretty stuck. So let's say he does something like this. We've got check, this goes here, check, goes here. Anyway, let's get back to where we were, because it didn't matter. He didn't play there. Who's this guy? D2. Knight was still back here. This guy was here. That was right. Obviously, queen to b6 would have been destroyed by this. That would have been pretty hard to defend against. So we do a queen swap. Oops, this guy was still here. Okay. Queen swap. Queen takes d2. So now we're in an endgame, technically, because the queens are off the board. Black is, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So white has 6 pawns, black has 6 pawns. We both have 2 minors and 2 rooks. He's got a bishop and a knight, I've got 2 knights. I've got a semi-open F file, open E file, a semi-open D file. E file is where I want to get my rooks to. Although it would be really hard to jump down to E2 at the moment. But we also have an open F file. So the F file and E files are open for me because I'll be able to intersect down here on F2. He goes knight to D7. And knight D7 obviously gets the rooks connected. We kind of want to get off a light square because of the light squared bishop being able to come over and do some harassment. He plays rook A1 to E1, check. King to e8 to f7, getting off of that diagonal. I don't like this bishop to c4, check. Where am I going to go from here? You have to go, you don't have to. I guess you could block it this way. Let's see what happens. So bishop to f1 to c4, check. And then, to f7. Bishop f1 to c4, that's check. How did he go rook a8 to e8? I guess I'm confused here. Did I castle? No. Oh. I still have the e pawn. Now it makes more sense. Bishop f1 to c4. Rook a to e8. So defending the e pawn. Bishop c4 to b3. I think they're going to try and create some counterplay on the queen side. c6 to c5, which is then trying to undermine this d4 pawn and gain some space. Knight g3 to e4, which is then attacking this pawn. We go knight takes e4, check. Rook takes e4. Knight f6, which is then attacking the rook, forcing him to move. So he goes e5. C takes d4. c3 takes d4. So then we swap those off, which then opens up another lane here. Rook e8 to e7. What are we looking to do here? Probably transition over to the d file, attacking this guy, but that's easily defended because I can't do anything because of the pin. What are we going to do here? The thing is this e6 pawn, everything that I have is doing something here. If I try to move over, then I drop the pawn this way, or with the check. Check would probably be the better way because then you can win this. And maybe I could do something like this. So knight to g4. But then, once again, we've got this. No. Well, let's see. Looks like this game's just about over. So we got rook h1 to e1. So everything's piling up on this e6 pawn. Rook h to e8. King d2 to d3. h7, h6. f2 to f4. And then they agreed to a draw because there's really no headway going on here. Thoughts on this one? Obviously, it was a short game today. I know we went over a lot of information on the fundamental chess openings, the Bronstein stuff, and Rios's book on all the different things. Key takeaways for me is in the pawn structure, really. That's where I want to harp on this today. Pawn structure, as in the book, pawn here, this guy's gone, these pawns are here, is this pawn structure. Now white is often going to try and place a knight on e5 and then target the weak h7 with queen to d3 and bishop to c2, which is going to be attacking this h7 pawn. Some of the lines that I've seen has actually had this knight come in here and then occupying this place when the rook swings over, which directly defends this h7 pawn. That's number one. Number two is gaining space with c3, c4, h2 to h4, and then placing your pieces harmoniously to defend the center. Things like this. Whoops, that's right. This guy could come here, the queen here, rooks in the center this way. I mean, things that are just going to help with my control, or white's control of the center. This is plan number 2 for white. Plan number 3 for white is playing c4 and then c5 to really restrict these queenside pawns, because black's not going to be able to play this pawn break to release some of that tension. And this also gains a lot of control of this d6 square. So if white manages to keep black counterplay under control, the game will be slow-paced, and white could even be able to combine some of these plans while black suffers through passive defense. Gotta be very careful. It seems like a lot of the things that I'm seeing here is attacking on this h7 square, as well as this fully restricting maneuvers on this side, because this is my main break. As far as black's concerned, is I want to break in the center with c5, which usually produces a 4-2, because we'll do this, and this will give me a 4 versus 3 and a 2 versus 3 pawn structure, which we'll go into that in just a moment. I don't want to get too bogged into the weeds on that. Rule number 1, break in the center with c5. Plan number 2, break in the center with c5, c6, e6 to e5, e6 to e5, in order to obtain a symmetrical position after white captures d takes e5, and then something will take this back, and then we have a really symmetrical pawn structure. Although this plan is rather unlikely to succeed, especially because of white's pieces typically control e5 from their standard squares, like the d4 pawn, knight on f4, or f3, rook on e1, queen on e2. They naturally defend against that e5 pawn push. But if you can do it, that's plan number 2. This is plan number 1. Putting pressure on the d4 pawn once c3 to c4 has been played. So we've got this. If he doesn't take it, we can obviously take, and then we've got an isolated d pawn to put some pressure on. And then plan number 4 is challenging white's control of the d5 square, which is this here. When white has played c4, I'm going to play b5, which is going to undermine this defense of d5s. They're either going to have to push this, which then gives me this, which would be a great outpost. Obviously, I've got less space, but that's an option. The final thing we want to go over is looking at the outposts. Some people could say that black can place a knight on d5 to compensate for white being able to place a knight on e5. But that's black's knight on d5 will create serious threats to white's position. Well, this is not the case. Some would say black can place a knight on d5's outpost to compensate for white playing a knight on e5. This is certainly not the case. It is unlikely that black's knight on d5 will create any serious threats to white's position, especially since white can just play c4 to get rid of this knight if it is absolutely necessary. In contrast, though, if you look at this e5, knight is very strong, as it creates threats against black's king. Black cannot easily expel this knight, since once f7 to f6 seriously weakens the king side. Let's look at the 3v3 versus 4-2 pawn structure. Because this is something that I'm probably going to get a lot. This is, if it's in this book, it's something that gets transitioned to quite a bit. Let's just take a look at it today. As described in the introduction, Black's main plan in the Caro-Kann is to achieve this break. This is a relatively simple pawn structure which offers balanced choices. White's plans in this one is to control the d-file and use it for a 7th rank invasion if possible. We're going to put rooks on the d-file and look to get to this d7 square, and then pursue a majority attack that is advancing the queen side pawns over here to try and create a passed pawn. Black's plan on the other side is to also try and control the d-file and use it for a 7th rank invasion as well. And then we can also look to pursue a minority attack with a7 to a5, b7 to b5 to b4. And if this plan is successful, Black will probably eliminate all 3 of the White's pawns. Thereupon, Black will attempt to win an endgame with 4 versus 3 kingside pawns. So if we're able to eliminate all these pawns, I don't know. Well, I'll have to do some digging on that one. But if we're able to eliminate all of these pawns, then we can try to win with the majority on the other side. Something to note in this is that both sides are going to be playing on the queen side. And that's logical because most of the time the kings will be castled on the king sides. Attempting a king side attack in such an open position is quite likely to backfire for either side. Of course, there are exceptions, and attacks could succeed if the pieces are already actively placed when we reach this structure. Nevertheless, it is not recommended to do a king side attack from scratch, as the opponent's likely to find a refutation in the center or the queen side. So whenever I transition to this, it's all going to be on the queen side. That's where we're going to be at. Whew. All right, guys, that was, for that being a shorter game of only 24 moves into a draw, I feel like there was a lot of information in that one. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this format, using all of the books and information that I have at my disposal. If there's something you guys would like to see, maybe a way of describing things, or any master games that you would like to see, please let me know. I am currently running through Zurich 1950. I've also got Bob Vinnick's 100 selected games, as well as Bobby Fischer's 60 memorable games, and selected games of Bobby Fischer, which is from one of his U.S. championship runs before 60 memorable games came out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you guys got something out of this as well. And we'll see you guys next time on Thinking Out Loud.